The New York Times has filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and its partner Microsoft to stop the use of its articles to train chatbots. It's the first major American media organization to take action against the artificial intelligence platforms. The New York Times said in a statement that it has invested heavily in its content and that if Microsoft and OpenAI want to use their work, they need permission. The New York Times is not seeking a specific amount of damages, but says that there are billions of dollars at stake. OpenAI says it's disappointed in the lawsuit and wants to work with content owners. For more on this, we've reached Nikita Roy. She's the president of the Ottawa chapter of the Canadian Association of Journalists and also the host of the Newsroom Robots podcast. We've reached her today in Manama, Bahrain. So Nikita, welcome. Thank you for this. We appreciate your time. We have seen authors and even comedians file lawsuits against AI, but the New York Times, this would be the first sort of major news outlet to file a copyright lawsuit. How significant is all of this?
It's enormously significant, Hillary. It's a landmark legal fight that really has the potential to shape the AI landscape and the news industry for decades to come. And that's because we don't have any clarity and answers right now as to what the copyright law looks like in the generative AI era. And the New York Times is actually doing a favor to all of us journalists and those in the news industry to take this legal route and to take these tech giants to court, because this will finally help us get the answers and the clarity that we eventually hopefully get.
When you look at this sort of case, who do you think has the upper hand here?
So it's a really complex case over there. So the core allegation centers around the fact that AI companies are using a vast amount of copyrighted content to train their AI systems. The controversy over here actually surrounds the fact that it's not just using the material for training purposes, but rather in how are they using it after being trained, which is a crucial aspect of the copyright debate. So here, New York Times is saying that OpenAI has trained their machines to learn from the Times content and come up as competitor to the Times, while also reproducing verbatim text from the New York Times in their outputs when prompted by ChatGPT and Bing Chat. So this is what the Times is actually alleging over here, that now these LLMs have the capability to produce content that is so strikingly similar to the original Times article. But the Times does not get any form of compensation or acknowledgement. And it's quite damning because in the exhibits that the New York Times has produced, you can see verbatim content that is being produced from these tech models, from these large language models. But as it also stands, as you were saying, Big Ning, the US legal system is a precedent-based system. And so far, the courts have been ruling in favor of the tech giants, as we saw in a case, one of the big cases that recently happened with Sarah Silverman versus Meta. The courts favored Meta in that case. And so that's also showing where maybe OpenAI might be having an upper hand in that case based on how the precedent so far has been set.
What do you think this is going to mean for the news industry as a whole? Of course, we don't know what the outcome is going to be in all of this. As you say, the U.S. system seems to have been siding a lot with some of these tech giants because of precedent. What is this going to mean for the news industry, though?
That's going to be quite an existential question for the news industry that we need to start asking ourselves right now, because as I actually had written in my Name and Lab article prediction for 2024, was that the news industry needs to really evolve the way we think about and innovate our business model, innovate upon our user experience. Because let's face it, the news has been taken from something that was print and moved to digital, but it still revolves around the same kind of business model of somebody coming to a website and advertisements being displayed, or something like you're having it behind a paywall and subscription. So the question now comes in terms of how should we as a news industry think about the entire user experience of news? How should we think about the way in which news is going to be delivered and the business model would evolve in this generative AI era? But at the end, the main issue that I would like to point out is that content is something that is being created and can be created by a click of a button now with the access to generative AI, whereas we in the news industry are in the business of knowledge creation, and that takes a lot of time and effort to do. We're in the business of knowledge creation, and that's something that we need to be able to we need for a society to thrive, for a democracy to function. You need journalism. And that's why AI needs to support AI companies needs to support journalism, and they need the journalists and the news industry to continue to exist and thrive.
It takes time and energy, like you say. It also takes a lot of money. And we have seen the Associated Press as one example here. We've also seen the publisher behind Politico actually strike deals with OpenAI for the use of their content, for the use of their information. Do you think that we might see the New York Times and maybe other publications strike similar deals?
I think it might be quite likely because I'm not sure if this is just a PR stunt as well that OpenAI is doing by getting all of these deals with publishers. But at the same time, they seem to have been in conversation with the New York Times, as was mentioned in the lawsuit as well. And the New York Times wasn't too happy with the deal and so proceeded with this court case. But at the end of the day, these tech giants might be able to pay off the big publishers, but the question then becomes what happens to smaller publishers that are maybe, as we saw in Bill C-18, we need to have these conversations quicker and bring New York Times to the plate, bring these news companies and this conversation of how is news and knowledge going to be compensated. This is more of, I would say, even an ethical and a moral issue that in the age of generative AI, when tech companies and AI companies can create content at a click of a button, anybody can. How do we compensate knowledge today?
Nikita, thank you for this. Great to speak with you.
Great to speak with you, Hillary.